Okay, I think everyone is in. All right. Thank you again. Welcome everyone to our session of the powers of multi-layer maps on PolicyMap. My name is Phil Vu. I'll be your trainer for today, hopefully showing you some really neat features on PolicyMap and our favorite tool, the multi-layer maps itself. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. This is a GoToWebinar format, which means everyone is muted at the moment. So if you have any questions, and we do hope you have questions, they are done as a control panel of GoToWebinar. You can just type your question into that control panel at any time. It'll come onto just my screen. And if it's a question that we can answer in the whole group, we can definitely try to answer it. And if it's a question that we can answer afterwards, we'll certainly follow up. This session is being recorded, and we will follow up with the recording, of course, and some additional links and emails in our emails that we'll talk about throughout the session as well. Other than that, thank you so much for attending. We hope to show you some pretty powerful tools with multi-layer maps on PolicyMap. The multi-layer maps tool itself is probably one of our most unique features in PolicyMap. It allows users to combine up to 5 data layers, apply conditions to each, and then quickly identify geographic areas where those layers intersect or even overlap. If you used the tool before, you might know how powerful the querying functions can be. The combinations of data that you can filter and query are pretty large. But we've spent the last year quietly enhancing the tool to deliver even greater flexibility and value to the tool itself. So what does it look like in practice? Multi-layer maps are designed for exactly the kinds of real-world questions practitioners face every day. Questions that require combining multiple criteria to pinpoint places of greatest need or opportunity. So to start, we should explain, of course, the different functions of PolicyMap itself. And to do that, I'm going to zoom into Philadelphia County. And if you're familiar with the tool, you'll know that the default function of PolicyMap is what we call a single layer map. And the goal of that is to give you a unique visualization of data. So let's say we want to look at uninsured population in the Philadelphia County. We've seen my sessions, you'll probably know I talk about this too often. But in this case here, the goal of a single layer maps is to show you multiple colors. And those colors in this case here are census tracts, and then the values of those colors are in the legend here on the left. So in this example, anything in a dark purple are tracts that have more than 13% of the persons here are without health insurance. And then the light purples are areas of 2.8% or less. And if we wanted to figure out in this example, let's say we're trying to find people who might need healthcare services in areas around the Philadelphia County. And so we do a couple of things that really help us out. The first is clipping the area of the data itself. So now we can just focus on Philadelphia County. It's very important. And that's in the button in the bottom here. And then with this, once we have this, we can say, you know what, of these areas that have a high concentration of uninsured populations, what are their accessibilities to something very simple like primary care doctors? And if we put this layer on single layer maps, what the system does is flips and shows you the other data layer on the map once it draws. And then from this, you can see it is always sorry about that. I'm not sure why that did that. As you can see, once it draws the data, it was working fine just now. You'll be able to see the areas of concentration that have a higher percentage of people with access to primary care doctors. Once we get all of Philadelphia populated, we'll see the rest of that. I believe it's a GoToMeeting constraint. There we go. So you can see here, areas that are in purple in this case are areas that have a higher percentage of persons that have access to primary care doctors, whereas this very singular area in the middle here have less than 70% or so of persons with access. So we'll clip this again. And while we can toggle back and forth between the two layers, what we want to do is be able to stack those two layers together within the tool. And so to do that, we will switch the function of PolicyMap from a single layer map to then what we call a multi-layer maps. And in the multi-layer maps, its goal is to show you one color. And that one color then is up to you to determine the value of the range of that color. So in the case of our initial layer, which is the percentage of persons without health insurance, the range for that is 0 to 100%. And in the map, once it loads, it will show us everything in purple. So it's the entire value. So in this, we're going to change this range, and let's say we want to find out places that have at least 8% of the persons without health insurance. And as you can see, the map changes from everything in purple to just a handful of tracts that are, in this case, have a minimum value of at least 8% of persons without health insurance. And if we take this now back to the data layer that we just talked about, which is access to primary care doctors, that value, when it's loaded, it starts at 42%, but maxes at 96%. And once that loads, we'll make this adjustments. And I do apologize if I talk a little fast and we travel a little fast and go through the data a little fast. It's all being recorded, so we'll make sure you have access to it. Some of the data sets are just something we're familiar with, so we can kind of navigate around, but we'll have a follow-up template to show you where we pull all these pieces of data from for your access. So in this case, let's say we want to find places that have no more than 75% of the persons having access to primary care doctors. And so here you can see it simply just isolates a very specific neighborhood in Philadelphia because these two data layers intersect with each other, showing us places that have at least 8% of the persons are without health insurance. And then of course, no more than 75% of the adults have access to primary care doctors. Now you probably want to know what's in the middle of that, of course. So if we add something very simple like hospital locations, of course there's a hospital right in the middle. But if we even go down further within the tool, we'll find out that that hospital is actually just a children's hospital. So we take this out to just short-term or long-term care, we'll see that there's no hospital within the tool. So that's kind of the basics of the multi-layer maps tool. The goal is to give you the ability to take multiple pieces of data, overlay them on top of each other, and try to find areas that meet that criteria. And of course, in that process, there are so many pieces of data and so many types of instances. So we're going to try to go through just a couple of very random and also hopefully unique instances and examples. So let's get out of Philadelphia County then. And then we're going to go over to Seattle. So what we learned about the multi-layer maps tool is the best way to really show you what it does is to give you some just general and maybe unique examples of how you're able to overlay different types of data. So in this case, we're moving into Seattle and we are trying to maybe have an urban lifestyle in that sense. And so with that idea, we want to make sure that we're in areas that are possibly walkable. And so there's a really unique data set that talks about walkability, and there's a score for that National Walkability Index. And in the case of the score for walkability, this allows you, 1 means that it's the least walkable, and then 20 is the max. So let's bring this all the way up to 18 because we really want to find a place that is walkable in the instance. So we start seeing places across Seattle and Bellevue and Renton and such. And so the next one, let's say we want to make sure that we're in areas that have users that don't have cars, so low car ownerships, because again, that will inflect people that might want to use public transportation and such. So again, back to transportation, there is vehicles per households and no vehicles. And in this case here, we're going to bring this up to 20%. And so now we have all the census tracts that meet both criteria of it's extremely walkable at a score of 18 and have at least 20% of the households do not even own a car. And of course, I'm a renter. Let's find out what the median rent is for that's affordable for this particular area. So under housing, rental units, there is median rent for all units. And this range here starts at $99 a month, which is incredible. But we're going to bring this down to 2,000 and max ourselves out. And so with this analysis, we're able to use two different types of data. We have data from the census and we have data from the EPA, and they're able to talk to each other based on the queries that we created. And from this, we can also download this data. So let's say we want to get a list of all of the census tracts and block groups that matched our criteria that we worked in the Seattle area. So with this, you can click onto the download button at the very top here. This will give us a chance to see the values that we created in our multi-layer maps, and then choose the area we want to download for. So we can just download for Seattle, but in this case, I'm going to try to get data for the entire county that Seattle would be in, which is King County. And when you receive the file, once it loads, there we go, you'll see that it will give you a list of every census tract, and then the values for the two data layers that match that, which is the percentage of households that do not own cars and the median rent. And then we'll also see the block groups that the walkability scores sit in. So now we can have this data in an Excel format. And if you are familiar with most spatial tools, you can join this data into another spatial software like ArcGIS and recreate your layers yourself, or use the data outside the analysis tool. If we continue with our Seattle example, you can add point data sets to the map. So if you wanted to find out of these locations, how many, or what's the bus line for the areas that they sit in, all this function allows you to be able to visualize that data. My bus lines. Sorry, that's what I meant. And in this case, you can see of our addresses, we can find out where they are in relationships to the bus routes in the given area. It's a really good question about the downloads. The current data download are only Excel formats because we are just delivering the data of the geographies that match that. So the question is it available for what we call shapefiles? At this time, our download are not compatible to those types of files. Something we will have in the future, but it's a really good question about the usability of data. All right. Let's get out of Seattle a little bit. So far, both examples that we've shown are generally a more localized way to look at data. But one of the nicer upgrades, and probably the most unique upgrades to the PolicyMap tool, is the ability to do these analysis at a much larger scale. So let's go to the state of, oops. Sorry about that, there we go. Let's go to Georgia. And in Georgia, we can do a couple of things that will really help us isolate the area that we're working in and that are fairly new to the PolicyMap tool for multi-layer maps. The first, of course, is still the clip. And then the other is the ability to, some really good questions, is to even clip the boundary itself. So now what we have is sometimes called an island print, but really what it does is it gives you the ability to only focus on this particular place. So when you print this or export this map, you'll only see the area of, in this case, Georgia. So in Georgia, we're looking to move to the state. And in here in the state, there are some really unique and very specific requirements that we're looking for when it comes to moving to the area itself. And the first, of course, is affordability. So let's say we want to find housing that's affordable in our given area. So we'll pull home sale data from Black Knight that we have at an annual value at the zip code level. And again, you'll see that everything is in purple, one solid color, and we can bring this number down. So the max of this is almost $10 million, and I don't think that's way out of our range. So let's bring this down to something like 300,000. And then with 300,000, we start seeing certain neighborhoods, certain areas that have more affordable values in their home sales. The next one, of course, for us is education. Education is a very important factor when it comes to moving into a neighborhood. And so from this, let's say we want to look at areas that are near a high performance core for elementary schools. This is from Niche Academy, just a really neat data set as well. From this is the distance to the high performing schools. So 50 miles is the max, that's pretty far. So we can bring this down to, let's say, just 5 miles. And so now we have a much smaller set of geographies that meet both criteria of no more than $350,000 in annual home sales from last year, and no more than 5 miles from a high performing school for those particular areas. So we really start seeing neighborhoods that around the state that are closer to what we're trying to identify when it comes to moving to the area. So let's add one last one, and we'll talk about how you can actually start using multiple data sets. So in this case, there's a really neat data set from the census, which is the Consumer Expenditure Survey. And this asks how much people spend their dollars on a variety of different things, and education cost is one of them. And so we can bring this up to say, let's say $112 a year. And so now with this query, we're able to identify only the places that meet all 3 criteria of no more than $350,000 in median home sale dollars, no more than 5 miles from a high performing school, and at least $1,200 in expenditures for education. The multi-layer maps feature allows you to overlay up to 5 variables in this case. And the more you add, the more detail that process can get. We generally try not to do too many in sessions. It gets very complicated when you start explaining it. But the other really unique function of this is that you can also change from what we call the intersection of data to the overlap. So right now we're looking at our query based on the intersection of affordable homes, distance to a high performing school, and expenditures for education. If we change the query to an AND function, to an OR function, what we're able to do is see how the data sets themselves overlap each other, where most of the state is pretty affordable when it comes to home sales, but certain areas of the neighborhoods meet 2 criteria, which is high cost of educational expenditures and distance to high performing schools. So this allows us to understand that Johns Creek and Sima are areas that probably do not have affordable homes, but they also match our criteria of accessibility for good education. Change this real quick. And then again, with the ability to clip information, when you do print this out, you have the ability to have a really unique printout, which will show the state, the area that you're working in, solely clipped onto that particular location. Some really good questions. I'm going to come to lots of good questions, and we're going to come to them towards the end as we talk about this. So the last example, and hopefully these examples will give you some ideas of how the tool is used, and we're going to go through some more interactive examples for users that have asked questions as well. Oh, some really good questions. All right, let's navigate and zoom all the way out. And probably the biggest and unique feature of our update is the ability to do these analysis at a national level. And at the national level, you're able to then start looking at places across the entire country, of course. And the goal of this is to less about trying to identify smaller neighborhoods in a given area, but generally areas across larger states, and start looking at a state-to-state comparison or so sometimes. So here we can start looking at maybe some health indicators and start understanding those health indicators and how they compare between states. Something like health conditions, including diabetes. So the default geography for this is counties, but we want to get a little more granular in our query, and so we're bringing this down to zip codes. So the one thing I always have to explain, when you start doing these at a national level, you'll see that the load bar will take a little bit, only because it is actually trying to load all the values for the entire state at the same time. So these are every census tract, or I'm sorry, every zip code that we're seeing. So in here, let's say in the case of persons with diabetes, we're going to bring this number up to 50%. So at least 50% of the adults in these zip codes have prevalence of diabetes from the CDC. And yes, there are unfortunately non-reports for certain years for certain states. It does happen. It's just an incident with the CDC and how it tracks data. But let's go to the next one, and we'll look at another chronic conditions, which in this case would be obesity. And again, the default geography here is trying to draw this data at the county level, but we want to match our current level, which was zip codes again. And in this case, we'll bring this up much higher to something like 45%. Now we start seeing a much larger cutaway of other states as we bring more and more layers to the cut. And of course, the last one we'll come back to would be uninsured population for us. So again, as you notice, the tool will always try to draw the current geography that the data is available at. At a national level, it's always going to try to draw. At the county level, it's available. But for us, we do want this to be consistent with the boundaries that we're working in. So we always want to make sure that our boundary goes back to the zip code level. And this is the one thing I always mention. As you can see, national queries do require a bit of processing. The work is actually being done on the server side. Sometimes if it's an easier map and easier boundaries that are familiar, the work will be done on the browser side. So it's a really cool upgrade to our technology to do this. In this case, it's going to take a moment. I'm going to change this. Right. And then we're going to cut this to no more than 10% of the persons without health insurance. So you can see how quickly these changes can affect and update the map. And this is really one of the neat upgrades to the PolicyMap tool, is that once it loads the first layer, or the layer that you're processing, the work is going to be done now on the browser side versus our side, what that means is it allows you to make these changes much more rapidly. So instead of 45%, we can change it to 40%, and the values will update much faster on the browser versus having to wait back and forth. This function allows you to do these large-scale national level analysis and adjust the ranges much more fluidly without having to wait for a tool to upload and process and such, because once it's loaded, the work now is being done on your browser side, which makes that process much more efficient. So you can see once we change the 45 to 40%, many more states are included, including West Virginia. But in this case, at a national level, we're able to see now a list of all the zip codes across the entire country that meet our three really important health criteria: obesity, diabetes, and uninsured population. And of course, in the same instance, you can also download all this data as well into one complete data set. So in here, we didn't define a geography at first. And so we're going to click the add button here and just type in the US. And when we download, we'll get a list of every zip code across the entire US with all three variables that we adjusted. And it'll look something like this. And so with this, it'll give us the state, the zip code that it falls in, and the different values of the three variables added into our criteria. So the multi-layer maps not only is the ability for you to use to do some either localized analysis, but also in this example, national analysis, but you're also able to download that data for your own records and for your own use outside of the tool itself. All right, so let me see if I can pull some questions that did come in while we were talking. Again, if you have any other questions, please just type them in. Some really good questions that did come in, and I try to answer some as we were going through this. One question is, yes, so the question is, can you download 2 data layers with the full range? And yes, of course, you can simply go in here, and I'm going to bring this down to a much smaller state, but let's go to something like Illinois. And with this, let's say we want to get a list of every census tract within Illinois. Ugh, that's big. Let's bring it down much smaller. We'll go to Chicago. I just realized how big that's going to be. Let's say we want to get a list of every census tract in Chicago that are eligible for some federal programs, something like the new markets tax programs. If you're familiar with this, it's a unique program. You can keep on eligible if you wanted to. We'll just keep those variables. And then the other one, let's go and see if they're eligible for the COVID recovery areas. So what we have here is we have 2 variables, data layers, and we have not made any adjustments. And with this, we can download we can download a list, and this will give us a list of every census tract in the entire city and the eligibility and non-eligibility for both tracts. The one thing you'll notice is that the boundaries are different, so you actually have 2 boundaries that will connect to each other in that particular download. So hopefully that gives you an answer of how to use the ability to download without having to change any variables. I'm not sure if the question of variables relational, but if you want to expand on that, I'm happy to answer that as well. The one question is, are you able to choose multiple variables that are relational? Oh, I see. Yes, so what you can do is, we can stick with Chicago again. Let's say you want to find out not only the percentage of persons that do not have health insurance, but also you want to find out the number of persons. So those 2 variables, I believe is what you're looking for, can be joined together. So in this case, if we were to go to uninsured population again, and we'll leave it at 8%, and then let's say of these 8%, we want to find out what that number actually represents. And so if we go back to uninsured population one more time and put again uninsured population, and in this case, we're going to change this from percent to number, and we'll leave it full. And so this particular map, but we can also adjust this, say at least 100 persons. So this map combines uninsured population both at the percentage value, which is 8% of the persons without health insurance, but also at the numerical value, which is at least 100 persons without health insurance. And if you were to download this, it will give you a list of every census tract, both the percentage of persons without health insurance, as well as the number of persons in that same download. I believe hopefully that's the question. The other question that's probably unique, and currently we do not have the functionality, and that's the ability to combine the 2 query types within the tool, which is the and the or function. So again, the and function is the ability to see how data intersects with each other, whereas the or is the ability to see how data overlaps with each other. We have some really good tutorial guides that I'll send in the follow-up email with the video that talks about those 2 relationships. But the ability to combine those 2 are not a function at this time as well, though. Oh, and a general question about citations. Yes, if you were to use the button in the bottom right-hand corner here, let me take this out and we'll put CDC primary care doctor back in here again. Yes, we have a citation function for any maps that you create on the tool. It is on the bottom right-hand button here. What this does is it captures the data that's in your query on your map. So this is the uninsured population, and this is also the access to primary care. It'll give you the data, the links for the data, and the years, and it's all editable, and you can change the formats and styles. Let's see what else we have here. I think a general question about when data is updated. Data in PolicyMap is updated based on the updates of the source itself. So if you click onto the source link in any data layer in the legend for the data, it'll take you to our data dictionary page, which we're doing a massive update. So this will be much different when you see it again. But in here, you'll see all the values of the data that we pulled, the source that it comes from, but more importantly, though, the year and the month that it was updated. So if you're interested in the American Community Survey, which is the census annual data, that is being updated currently. It was delayed about a month and a half, in part to just timing. Then, of course, the government shutdown closed the shop, but it has been released on the tables, and then the data itself is being released, we hope, in a couple weeks, and then our team will have it up in about a couple weeks as well. So yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. So the question was, can you deselect non-eligible tracks? Yes. So when we initially had those federal guideline data sets, let's say new markets again, if you deselect non-eligible, it'll only show eligible tracks. In that case, you'll be able to download just the eligible tracks in that query. So some of these questions are just general questions about the tool, so I do apologize if you've seen this before a little bit. But one of the questions is, can you draw a radius within a certain location? Yes, that is what we call a custom region feature, and that is up here, which allows you to either draw a boundary on the tool, assemble a boundary by clicking together geographies, or in your request, the ability to use the radius feature to do just that. Great. So some of these questions are questions that will follow up. Generally, the main question, I believe, was, can you download? Download is simply just the button on the very top-hand corner. And when you click onto that, it'll pull any data that you had originally on your analysis, giving you the ability to define the area that you want to download for, in this case. In that same process, multi-layer, if you're familiar with the download tool in PolicyMap, when you do select a place in here, let's say we select Illinois one more time, the regular download in PolicyMap, a single layer download, allows you to determine the geography that you're downloading for, but in a multi-layer download, that geography is already being determined when you create the multi-layer map, so there's no function for that. So hopefully that makes a difference if you're a user of the tool. All right, let me know if you have any other questions about the multi-layer maps. I'm hoping some of these examples will give you an idea of how you can use it and how powerful the function of it is to interact with. The session is recorded. We also will include the templates for all the examples that we mentioned, so that way if you wanted to follow up on your own, we have lots of tutorials, lots of ways to use the tool. The benefit of the multi-layer maps is the ability to overlay so many different types of data within the tool. And of course, being able to do it at a national level really gives you a powerful way to look at data across the entire US as you're doing a bit of analysis. So I will answer any general questions about the tool itself separately, so that way we don't combine too much in today's training about the multi-layer maps, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how it is. Otherwise, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer while we're here. I'm glad that it's shorter than we thought. Hopefully it gives you an idea of how to use it, but if you wanted to learn some of this on your own, again, we will send you guides, but you're also welcome to email us or contact us, and we will go through some of these sessions and examples on your own as well, individually.